The Americas are home to many impressive animals, but by far its two most impressive large cats are the Puma and the Jaguar. While cougars, also known as mountain lions or pumas, are usually associated with North America. Jaguars, in contrast, are usually more associated with the South. But despite this, they actually share a lot of their range and habitat with each other. Because of this, it is inevitable that these two large cats will occasionally interact. So, what happens when these two awesome apex predators meet up? Are they friends, enemies, or something a little more complicated? And most importantly, what happens when these two creatures do fight? Who usually comes out on top? Well, let's cue the overly dramatic intro and figure it out. So for starters, where exactly can you find both these big cats sharing the same habitat at? Well, the answer to that is pretty much everywhere. From the jungles of beasts to the sky mountains of Mexico and southern Arizona to even the Amazon rainforest, these two creatures share a shocking amount of habitat with each other. That alone just makes it all the more surprising that these two hypercarnivores rarely seem to fully outcompete each other. This is mainly because jaguars typically prefer to go after larger prey, and they're also a lot more willing to go after reptilian prey in areas which happen to be more rainforesty. In contrast, cougars typically prefer more medium-sized mammalian prey, with themselves also occasionally going after birds and smaller mammals. Regardless, that doesn't mean that these two big cats' diets don't overlap at all. Both jaguars and cougars will regularly go after deer, pigs, and peccary on top of wishing to scavenge upon the same carcasses. So, how exactly do these two avoid running into each other while they're hunting? Well, you see, it actually has a lot to do with timing. While both these large cats can be quite territorial, they can also be just as cryptic. Because of this, in order to avoid each other, they do what is called niche partitioning. While most predatory competitors will niche partition by going after different prey items, jaguars and pumas actually niche partition in a very different way, that being the times of day in which they choose to be active at when they do share habitat. In Ecuador, a study found where jaguar and puma ranges overlap that jaguars tend to be more active during the daytime, while pumas tend to be more active at night. This is quite interesting because in places where these two animals don't overlap at all in their ranges, jaguars would typically be just as active during the daytime as they would be at night. While in contrast, pumas would also normally be a little more willing to come out during the daytime, especially in places where they're the dominant predator, such as Patagonia. Interestingly enough, something similar seems to happen in North America, where mountain lions are often more inclined to come out at night in areas which they share their habitat with bears, which also just so happen to be one of the mountain lion's main competitors. It does make you wonder, though, why is it that the jaguar, despite being the larger of the two cats, decides to stay active more during the daytime compared to its puma neighbors? Well, there's actually a few possible reasons. Unlike pumas, jaguars actually really like the water, and this gives them access to a lot of extra food sources in places where water is plentiful. Caiman, capybaras, and even large fish are all on the menu for these jaguars. And normally, these food options simply aren't available for the puma. Thankfully for the jaguar, these food options are all usually pretty active during the daytime, in some cases even more so than at night. So that allows for the jaguar to pretty much have a 24/7 buffet. But unfortunately, not every habitat which these jaguars call home is abundant in water. The sky islands of Mexico and Arizona don't have nearly as much water as the many jungles which these jaguars call home, and they just so happen to have not just jaguars but also pumas in these mountain ranges. Additionally, even though these mountain ranges could be hundreds, if not thousands of feet up in the sky, they still do experience a lot more heat compared to the jungles of the Amazon or even bison. Thanks to both of these factors, the jaguars of Mexico and Arizona sky islands tend to be a lot more nocturnal, which just so happens to put them in a lot more competition with the pumas that call these areas home. While Mexico and the southwestern United States mountain lions tend to be more active during the daytime in the winter months. During the summer, they tend to be just as nocturnal as the jaguars, and this leads to a lot more competition between these two predators. Multiple trail cameras found throughout the Sonoran Desert have observed both of these creatures, not just scent marking the same places and walking within the same habitats only a couple hours apart from each other, but they've even found evidence that these creatures have fought, And in some cases, people have even observed these two animals fighting directly. And that raises the question, who actually normally comes out on top in these confrontations? Is it the jaguar or the mountain lion? Well, the answer is actually quite surprising. But first, if you're enjoying this video so far, a like, a subscribe, or pressing that little confusing hype button thingy would help so much. Not just to boost my ego, but also to make me money. As YouTube is my main source of income, and I want to continue to make more videos like this in the future for you guys. So, now, let's get back to the real reason why you're watching this video. Overall, while confrontations between these two large cats are rare, they still do certainly happen and occasionally result in all-out brawls. In northern Mexico, where the interactions between these two species occurs the most often, the jaguar typically has the size advantage with themselves averaging out at about 150 to 250 lb. The mountain lions of northern Mexico, for comparison, only get about 100 to 150 lb on average. Interestingly enough, though, both species do tend to get larger in areas where their ranges do not overlap, suggesting the fact that the competition between these two does result in smaller sizes for both species. Regardless, when it comes to these two creatures going into combat, the puma isn't entirely at a disadvantage. Cougars, on average, tend to be a lot more flexible and agile compared to jaguars. Even with their size disadvantage, reports of them winning fights with jaguars have occurred on multiple occasions, both in the wild and in captivity. Still, unfortunately for the cougar, this tends to be more of the exception than the normal. That isn't actually because of the jaguar size, but rather its weaponry. Jaguars, on top of having significantly larger claws and teeth than the average cougar, also tend to have the strongest bite force of any big cat, at least in terms of PSI. Luckily for the jaguar, this weaponry advantage usually allows for them to win most confrontations when they do happen to fight really any sort of cat, especially pumas. That still doesn't always mean that the jaguar is the dominant species everywhere where these two creatures share habitat with each other. Pumas, cougars, mountain lions, whatever you want to call them, tend to adapt a lot more to urban life compared to jaguars. While jaguars almost always avoid civilization, pumas oftentimes go directly into it. This, in many cases, has not just allowed for amazing photos like these to occur, but it's also allowed for the pumas to access a whole new slew of prey sources that come directly from us. It has also allowed for these pumas to avoid competition with other predators that tend not to adapt as well to urban life, including jaguars. As stated before, pumas on average tend to be the most successful in the northernmost and southernmost parts of their range, where they tend to have less competition with other predators, including jaguars. This has allowed for them to balloon in size in these areas and also abundance. In Patagonia in particular, these pumas could get up to 200 pounds and can be found regularly hunting guanos with no competition thanks to the lack of jaguars. Similarly, in the deepest parts of the Brazilian Amazon, where pumas simply can't be found, jaguars tend not just to get larger on average, but they also tend to have much smaller home ranges, leading to much denser populations compared to what they would have in other parts of the world where they have to coexist with pumas. At least for the jaguars, having another predator around isn't always a bad thing. While incredibly rare, jaguars have been known to hunt other predatory mammals, including both bears and cougars. Even though this behavior isn't common, it still is beneficial to the larger jaguars, which share their habitat with other predators. After all, by eating other predators, you're not just removing competition, but you're also giving yourself another large food source, which can help you to live another day. Still, these two creatures aren't always enemies. When raised together at a young age in captivity, they could actually grow up and get along perfectly fine with each other. Regardless, what we should all be thankful for is the fact that neither mountain lions or jaguars normally see people as a food source. Unlike their other big cat cousins, jaguars tend to prefer to avoid people entirely. Similarly, even though they aren't true big cats, pumas also tend to prefer to avoid people when given the chance, even if not to the same degree as the jaguar. Despite these two creatures not really being the best of friends, in actuality, they still want nothing to do with each other. Unfortunately, due to habitat loss, human-wildlife conflicts with both
the jaguar and the puma are becoming increasingly common across both their ranges. This has not just led to more people having to deal with both these large cats, but also these large cats coming into more conflicts with each other, as they no longer have the same amount of habitat that they would have had only 100 years ago. Hopefully, through videos like these, we could help to spread more awareness about not just how amazing both these large cats are, but also how much we need to protect them for future generations to come. Now, with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, because I try to make animal mini documentaries every single week. So, please help me out in any way you can. And hopefully by doing that, I'll be able to see you, and maybe, if I'm lucky, even one of these large cats in the wild in the future. But in the meantime, goodbye.